Students returned to Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida today, 2 weeks after the massacre that took the lives of 17. Today, we have breaking developments on the investigation. Florida's House has issued subpoenas to the Broward County Sheriff's Office, school board, and several local governments in its evaluation of what went wrong. Will Sheriff Israel release the surveillance video showing the police response to the mass shooting? A lot of controversy over that response. Meanwhile, over in our nation's capital earlier, the president sat down with members of Congress from both sides of the aisle to discuss changes to our nation's gun laws.
We're going to come up with some ideas. Hopefully we can put those ideas in a very bipartisan bill. It would be so beautiful to have one bill that everybody could support. We have to do something very decisive. Number one, you can take the guns away immediately from people that you can judge easily are mentally ill. I don't want mentally ill people to be having guns. You know, you rate movies for different things. Maybe you have to also rate them for terror, for what they're doing and what they're all about. Some of you people are petrified of the NRA. You can't be petrified. They want to do what's right, and they're going to do what's right. I really believe that.
Kimberly, so the president came up with some basic ideas, like not selling guns to people under 21. He wants more of a universal, not quite universal, but better background checks. And then there's the question sitting out there about assault weapons. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, it makes sense. When you sit home and you listen to this and you think about the perspective of, you know, we would like some uniformity and conformity in terms of background checks. We would like all the states to have somewhat of a similar background check that is thorough, that's comprehensive, and then people actually comply with that by turning in the information, updating the database to make sure that it is current and active. It really calls for that because it's so important in terms of a public safety perspective, and to make sure that people, if they are troubled and they're having issues, that the most recent information is compiled and uploaded in the system to be available to law enforcement, to different agencies, to mental health care professionals, to know who they're dealing with. That, I want that too. Wouldn't you want that? You want that kind of consistency across the board, so that if you go into Alabama, it's not different than, say, if you go into California, while at the same time respecting the constitutional rights and the Second Amendment and people's right to bear arms, and part of that includes going through these checks.
And Jesse, the president said today he still likes the idea of arming teachers, and then he says to the meeting, but I understand a lot of you don't like that idea, and we just recently had a report of a teacher with a gun having a little incident. I think it was in Georgia. So where do you think that stands?
That's a tough one. I think there's a lot of disagreement on that issue, and it depends where you are in the country. And people in Manhattan think that's wild. And then you go out to anywhere else and they think, oh, yeah, that's normal. A lot of states already do it. There was a key moment, I thought, today where the president was kind of mocking Senator Toomey from Pennsylvania about being beholden to the NRA. And they asked him about raising the age limit. And Toomey had a really great response. And he said, well, Mr. President, there's a lot of 18, 19, and 20-year-old men and women in my state of Pennsylvania that want to use an AR for fun, for target, for hunting. Why should we deny those law-abiding people their constitutional Second Amendment rights? And the president kind of sat back and he said, all right, well, he looked at Manchin and he said, yeah, you guys really have to get together on that, because that's going to be a critical issue. But that, on the Broward County thing, we're looking at information now from sources that said that the people that showed up, the police officers, were told not to go in unless they had body cameras, and none of them had body cameras. The EMTs that showed up were told not to go in. One of the EMTs told Fox News, everything I was trained on mass casualty events says they did the wrong thing. Training since Columbine has been first responders, police go in immediately with paramedics. So they had this de-escalation policy at the Broward County Sheriff's Department, and they had this other program called the Promise Program where they don't arrest students for criminal activity. And then you get the point where he appoints his friends to that position. And he was also involved in the Fort Lauderdale shooting at the airport, which went horribly wrong. And he was castigated for that. Radio transmissions went down in the Fort Lauderdale shooting as well. Radio transmissions suspiciously went down in this shooting, too. And now he's saying that they called the house 23 times, you responded. Turns out it was twice that. This guy, this sheriff, is a real villain. And I don't like what he's done, how he's conducted himself. And it looks like the Florida legislature is going to take some action against this guy.
So there's a lot of stories in there, Jesse, but we got to move on. But I just wanted to say to you, Dana, Dick's Sporting Goods has now come out and said they will not sell assault weapons. They're not going to sell any gun, handgun, assault rifle, any gun to someone who's under 21, and they're not going to sell high-capacity magazines.
So I mean, it could be that this is a good PR move for them, but it's also, you are making a decision about selling a product. Maybe their sales weren't very good. Maybe this won't hurt them that bad on the bottom line. Maybe it will actually increase sales if people decide that might be a good place to go. And if you don't mind, I just want to comment on these sessions that the president is having. There's something very special about them. Mm-hmm. Especially if you think about, do you remember that open session that President Obama had on Obamacare early on, and Paul Ryan was there, and the president took a real shot at Paul Ryan.
And he took a shot at McCain, too.
McCain in that same event. And I just remember that was 2009, maybe early 2010, and it set bipartisan relations way back. And it doesn't get back on track until there's some moments where there's some crises on the budget where they have to get together.
Right.
In these settings, the president is calling members of the Senate by their first name, not disrespectfully, but in a way that is actually quite friendly. He's forcing people to come to the table, and it is not without risk to have open cameras there where anybody could come out and say anything. And I find that the members actually feel confident enough to say something in front of the president, in front of the cameras, that is not showboating. And I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen. If they continue to have these open forums and nothing results from them, then I think they'll get a little bit old.
Right.
But right now, it's very special.
I like the congeniality
I'll build on what you,
of it.
yeah, I'll build on what you said. What's most important, I think, is the conclusion at the end. He says, I like Manchin Toomey. When Steve Scalise put his hand up and says, I want to get concealed carry in that, he goes, Steve, I'm your biggest fan, but that's never going to work. Not on this bill.
Right.
I want to go back to that. Then Dianne Feinstein, he goes, hey, can I get weapons of war involved in that? And he goes, guys, what do you think? They're like, I don't know. He goes, Mr. President, if you tell them, they'll do it. And they all laugh. And to tell you the truth, this makes me realize, if you could follow me on this, why The Apprentice worked. Because the boardroom is actually real. That's the way he conducts his life. So they would edit that and do a good job on it. But for the most part, those celebrities sat in front of him, and or the real people, and that's how he acts.
Imagine if you could fire them.
So this communications team, once a day over the last 4 days, has sat all these people around him and said, Mr. Trump, Mr. President, be Mr. President. And he sat there. And I remember Joe Manchin said, I don't like being senator because I really don't do anything. He's like, I can't get anything done. As governor, I got to do things. Now, he's in the game. He just said now, before we walked out, if he was president, if this was our president in 2013, we would have got stuff passed after Sandy Hook.
Wow.
That's a Democrat from West Virginia. I know he's got to get reelected, but still, it was unsolicited.
Well, I think a lot of people would like to know the president's positions, but I hear what you're saying. This is the president's style, is to say, you guys, we want to get something done.
He's
Give
not
me
a
something.
micromanager.
Well,
and
definitely
the senators
not.
like that. I think it probably will work better.
Well, let's see what happens.